So for this conversation, I don't know if did you have a chance to listen to any of the other interviews?
I did. I listened to like the first part of Sarah's around why she chose counseling psych over counselor ed and like the journey into making the decision.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's good. Um, yeah. So I mean, I wanted to interview you and just see what kind of comes up for you. It's actually been a while, so I was actually realizing I don't actually remember exactly what the process was. I know you were in the school counseling program, and it actually just seemed like CEP was going to be a pretty good fit for you. I don't remember us really waffling much, and more than anything, I kind of remember. I don't actually remember exactly how it happened, but I kind of knew I didn't want you to feel pressure, any kind of like conflict around staying with the team and the decision of which program to be in. So, but my memory is actually a little bit vague. But I will say it didn't seem like it was. I think with Sarah, there were a few different factors that I think made both actually very attractive, and so I actually see why that kind of took longer for her to figure out. But yeah, what do you remember about that process?
Well, that was what, in 2015, I think. And I had met with you in the lab and knew there were some overlap in interests, but that I wanted to go into the school counseling program. Like, that was my plan, and that's what I was doing. And I had mentioned the thought or idea of getting a PhD, but never, I don't know, for me, it was like this distant thought that was like this fancy idea that was actually never going to be a reality. And then I remember early fall of 2015, you were like, oh, the applications are due. Are you thinking about applying? And in my mind, it was always counselor ed because I felt like
Right.
it fit with the way I conceptualize the work that I do and the work that I wanted to do and the way I view clients and wellness and teaching, quite honestly. And so I was like, oh, I've thought about counselor ed, but I didn't know that that was going to be a reality. He said, well, why don't you look into the application process? And so then I started looking into the application process and thought, well, I could apply, but I probably won't get in. So this is like mentality back from probably small town Tracy girl who didn't think she could do hard things. And yeah, it was pretty clear. I mean, I met with Dr. Chang once and she was like, why do you want counselor ed versus counseling psych? You're working with Dr. Davis, you're in a positive psych lab, like what makes sense? And so I talked to the wellness piece around counselor identity and the way I wanted to teach, and service was important to me. And so she said, yeah, it seems like this would be a fit. So it was never like I felt like I was toying with both ideas. I knew I liked what y'all were doing in the lab and the exposure to research, but I knew that the more important parts to my identity was a counselor first, and then a teacher and a mentor and supervisor. And so, yeah, I started to think about applying, and then I think I got my application together within the month and then wasn't going to apply because then I realized, well, what if I don't get in? And I'm still in the school counseling program. So what is that going to mean? Because I'm going to be stuck here for another year and that'll be embarrassing. I don't think I can get in. And then knowing that it's a numbers game and realizing I was only playing with one card, I was only applying to Georgia State and whether that was going to be beneficial or not. And so it was a lot of like personal doubt and then wondering what it would do professionally for me being at Georgia State for another year, and ultimately decided to apply, and then almost didn't go through with the interview process because personal stuff was happening that would mean I would have to stay here for 4 years if I committed, which seemed like a wild idea, knowing I was going to be so far from everybody that I felt like I cared for. But something that you said that was helpful in the process was about the department and the fit for me. So even though I only applied to one school, you said, well, what if you don't apply here and you apply other schools and you don't get the same kind of fit that you feel and like community you've established here? And I thought, oh, that's true. This is going to be a huge endeavor. And if I apply to other schools and don't know what those are like and choose not to apply to Georgia State for the sake of saving face, then what if I don't get this community or can't recreate it somewhere else? If I don't do it now, or if I don't ever apply to Georgia State. And so that was helpful in realizing, well, if I don't do it now and I wait and I wait and I wait, what if this opportunity isn't there again? And so I think it was something along the lines of, you get to make your decision. Like, don't let somebody else make the decision for you, which is ultimately why I ended up getting to the interview or the social after an emotional roller coaster of a decision making process. And then, yeah, they offered, and I think I waited 2 or 3 weeks to say yes. I think I was like one of the longer waiting um, wait times for an applicant, and then I decided to stay, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, man. The feeling I'm having is like, isn't it nice to be on the other side of these selection processes?
It's wild. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm done, and at the same time, I've been done basically since March. So it's like, whoa, you did
Yeah.
that whole hard thing, and now you don't have to do that again.
It is. It's stressful, and I mean, yeah, the applying to a doc program is stressful, and you need support for that. And yeah, I mean, it even reminds me. I mean, I from hearing you talk about it, I can still remember my own process. Like the front end of that is scary. Like you really do need to have your sense of self not tied in what happens, because you're more than just the application process. But and then yeah, you just got a job, so it's, I mean, you really you've cleared there are some kind of high stakes selections, and you have cleared,
I know. I remember when
Some
I
of the
got
big
it,
ones.
and I was so tied to California, and then eventually along the way, they're like, I realized, well, maybe I don't need to be in California. And remember people in the program telling me, you're not going to end up in California. Like, don't expect to end up there your first faculty position. And then for whatever reason, there were a million jobs open this year in California, and applied and feel like I ended up exactly where I wanted to and didn't know I needed to be. But
Yeah.
it's been a wild ride, but I'm grateful that I chose to continue and didn't pack my bags and leave in 2016.
Yeah, totally. So one other question I was going to kind of ask you, because I mean, I imagine, I mean, so far it seems to be like once every third year or so, I'll have a CEP student that kind of cross trains. So you were in a group, and I mean, right now we have about three CEP students who kind of sit in with the Positive Psych Leadership Seminar. But I mean, in a certain way, that group, I mean, I probably have almost every year a counseling psych student. So, I mean, what would you say, looking back, what was helpful about cross training? Because I mean, I remember there were parts of that were tough, like, because actually, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what was tough for you, but even as a mentor, like, I could tell that I could give you some of what you needed, but not all. So I knew that I needed to partner with other CEP faculty to make sure that you had everything that you needed. And that was clear to me from the very beginning. Thankfully, we had a number of people who were happy to kind of support that. And so I thought, it came together really well. So yeah, I'm curious kind of your perspective on, what were the hard parts about cross training, and what do you think you got out of that may have been helpful and might help you in your career in the future?
Yeah, I mean, so many things. Like, it was so clear to me in the interview process that I was, and I don't say this with any kind of like lack of humility. You probably know this more than anybody, that I doubt all the things that I'm capable of doing on a regular, but that I was so well prepared to do the job, specifically to be able to teach about research in the world of counselor education. Not to say that it's not as strong, but I feel like when I look at the people that I went through the CEP program with and compare even like small things like cleaning a data set, and my knowledge around why you do what you do and how you do it and the steps to do it efficiently using syntax even, and the knowledge that the folks that I went through the program with had around those three simple tasks, which initially felt like the end of the world. It took me 10 million hours to clean a data set the first time. And now I can just kind of go through, do it really quickly using syntax, and in large part because of the lab. And
Mm-hmm.
so probably the hardest parts of that process were realizing or owning that, not owning that I didn't know things. I did know things. The things that I was good at and strong at were just different than the things that I was sitting in a room with other folks with that were in a different program, which is why we're in different programs, a part of the reason. And so some of it was like language and these fancy research words that probably I still don't always know, and not sitting there thinking I don't know anything. I do know something. I just know things that are different than what we're speaking about right now. And at the same time, being able to hear those words and familiarize myself with the process of research and what that looks like in application instead of this like overwhelming abstract thing was really helpful, because even though I didn't always know what we were talking about, it was exposure to a world I wouldn't have had exposure to during my doc program until dissertation. And uh, I felt really prepared to do dissertation. I didn't ever feel like I was stuck or that I couldn't do it or that I wasn't going to finish, because I knew what it took to get to the end, because I got to watch so many people do research projects that weren't related to predis or dissertation, for the
Yeah.
sake of doing research. And so not owning this I don't know anything narrative was probably the hardest part for me, but then the benefits so much outweighed that narrative that eventually when I got to job talks, I thought, oh my goodness, like shit, you know stuff. Like you know how to talk about research. And at the end of a job talk, I remember in San Jose, he came up to me, one of the professors, and said, it is clear you're a big fish and you're going to be swimming in a small pond if you come here. You come from an R1. And for them to say that to me when I had talked to you at length about how nervous I was to talk about my research and Predis specifically, was wild to me. Like, am I really that good of a liar, or do I actually know stuff? Like, am I good at faking it? And my takeaway, because it happened at every interview, was that I know stuff. And I think
Yeah.
I learned that. I know I learned that through my opportunities in the lab. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was huge for my development as a researcher.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun for me to see, especially your dissertation project come together. Because I think with your predis, it was a data set that I had, and to some extent, I don't think I even had a totally clear plan of what the analyses were going to be. So that became clear to both of us at some point. So I mean, honestly, I've started to kind of reconsider that process. Sometimes a shortcut is a long cut. But for your dissertation, I mean, I'm not sure if you how much it was able to sink in, but both of those projects were very good. I mean, hopefully they'll both get accepted in somewhere like JCD. But I mean, I could tell that you were able to integrate your interests, and you really did start to kind of get a feel for what it's like to develop a research program and kind of function more autonomously. And yeah, I mean,
Great. Like,
that was kind of a cool contrast for me to see, because it was night and day in terms of just, I mean, I could tell you had a different level of kind of, I mean, the analogy I think of is it's like if you had someone playing Little League Baseball, and like the bat they're swinging is a little bit too big at first and they don't really feel like it's theirs. And then by the time you were working on your dissertation, like you knew what you were doing.
it was so nice. And then to be able to help people in the CEP program
Yeah.
that were graduating and working towards defense. And I thought, in what world did I ever think back in 2016 I would be able to help people run their analyses and use syntax for their dissertation? And it was so cool to be able to do that and know that I knew what I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, in a certain way, like, I actually think I have a little bit of a bias for people who have been in athletics, because at some level that's something I could actually tell in you is you did have a concept for training. And even before you kind of felt the sense of kind of higher self-efficacy, I could see that you actually had the types of discipline that would end up maturing into higher levels of skill, I could just that was probably the first thing that I kind of saw, and I'm like, oh yeah, she'll get there. And then the other, I would say the second thing I saw was you you had a knack. I mean, you were interested in actually the things like grant writing, like scholarships, different things like that. I mean, I honestly haven't had other students that liked that part in the same way. But I saw you liking that before you liked just writing. Like, I think it took a little longer for you to kind of intrinsically enjoy writing. But I saw that part come online pretty soon. And I'm like, oh yeah, that, she'll be able to work that out. Cause I mean, you can write in teams. So, you have the social skills to, kind of divvy off the parts that you don't want to do. But I was like, oh yeah, she'll be able to find a part that she wants to do.
I mean, it was free money. And two, it was like an academic way to write about what's important to me. And that felt easier. And then probably a little bit of the athletic side of like this competition to see if I can get this one big thing, or if I can train writing and way of articulating what's important to be able to get or win this, like whatever it was. And that was fun to me too. And when I didn't get them, I would work harder to figure out what went wrong and then do it again. And so I felt successful, which was nice.
Yeah.
And not getting in my way and getting feedback about my writing, which took a while to learn, but after I did that, it was easier.
No, yeah, I mean, honestly, and that was one of the first places I saw your writing really sharpen. And so, I mean, and fairly quickly, I mean, I was like, oh yeah, she's a good writer. She, when, when there's a grant on the line, yeah, this is good.
$20,000 makes a difference.
No, I mean, seriously. But there is an aspect of academia that it is a little bit of a game, and it's the kind of game that it's stressful if you take it too seriously. Like I think you have to kind of keep it in a certain place. And I think in a certain way, it seems like post athletes kind of get that at some level, is like, there's a game aspect and you put a lot into it, but you don't put your whole sense of self into those things, so, which is kind of a hard balance to strike. Well, is there anything else, Vanessa, is there anything else that you would say to, not everyone kind of finds that decision as clear to kind of sort through, but is there anything else you would say to folks who are kind of say they're in a master's program and they're in their first year or two and trying to kind of figure out a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me in the process, even though I wasn't going back and forth between counseling psych and counselor ed, was just like figuring out why I wanted to do it in the first place. A PhD sounds really shiny and nice and pretty, and the process to PhD is really ugly and hard and exhausting and depleting. And so knowing why you want to do whatever direction you choose to do, for me, was the most important, because it was helpful in remembering, like, okay, this feels really shitty and this is why you're doing it. And I think sometimes folks get into a PhD program not knowing exactly why they want to do it, which makes it, in my experience with some of the people I know and colleagues I have, more difficult to finish, and some don't, because they don't have a clear outline as to what's motivating them to get to the finish line, because it's hard. And your life changes and it looks very different in ways that you sometimes anticipate and some don't. And so having a very strong why behind either direction, I think, is really important.
Yeah. So what was at the core of your why?
For me, it was, one, representation.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of academics that look like me, and what it means for me to be able to do something that I don't think I can do, that's hard, to create systemic change for the kiddos that I was working for. So a big part of it was the kiddos that were undocumented that I was working for, and wondering how I could help in ways that I didn't know I had the language or research or abilities to do at the time. And then two, what it means for me to be in a position that I'm in now, and what it means for the kiddos that I was working with clinically, what it means for the master's students that I'll hopefully mentor and work with along the way, and what it means for like general representation in counselor education, and showing specifically my kiddos, like, you can do hard things. Maybe it doesn't look like this, but like I did a hard thing. And I love
Yeah.
teaching, I love mentoring, and at the same time, the representation that brings, and like speaking to kiddos K through 12 and saying like, what is your hard thing? What's something you don't think you can do? Well, let's talk about how you can get there and how it's not going to always look like A to Z. And there will be lots of different twists and turns that it takes to get there. And I feel like, I don't know, that was meaningful to me in a way that I didn't fully anticipate. And I'm grateful that I chose to continue, because I'm here. I did it. I finished. And if I can do it, then little Susie down the street can do it too. And so, yeah, systemic change, and then just representation and showing
Yeah.
folks you can do hard things too.
Yeah. No, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, and I think a lot of other people will connect to something very similar. I'm glad you took the leap of faith. I remember that process, and part of it was scary to be, to commit to such a long period of time away from family, and you were in a transition, and so yeah, I feel already grateful that you kind of made that leap of faith, and it'll be fun to kind of look back, in 20 or 30 years and just see the fruit of that decision. I mean, you're kind of just now getting started, but I think there'll be many different kind of aspects of your vision and what you're hoping for in your career. So I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You were a big part of that journey and process. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, we're all very proud of you. So, and wishing you the best.
Thank you.